New episode. Singing Mythology of Wukong. Part 1. The wicked must have heard many stories about him, about his journey with Tang Sanzang to seek the scriptures of the Buddha, and then become the victorious fighting Buddha, residing forever in Mount Ling. But some people argue that he was not granted the grace to become a Buddha, or perhaps he died long ago. Regardless of the truth, he was born with the witness of heaven and earth, and once caused a great disturbance in the heavenly palace, shaking the three realms. He encountered many demons and monsters, but perhaps the time he sat on a tree branch, watching the devastation of the Guanyin temple, was when he was most satisfied. For many people, this is probably an old story, but I believe that behind it, there are still many hidden secrets, difficult to discern. So why don't you sit down here, so that tonight's story of Singing Mythology of Wukong can begin? Chapter 1. Singing of the Cassock. The monks gathered in the hall, united in their evil intentions. But little did they know, the fire would turn against them, the Guanyin temple in ashes. Guangzi, Guangmu, where are you? Quickly enter the fire, quickly. Thousands of miles west of the eastern land of the Great Tang lies the Black Wind Mountain. At the foot of the mountain, there is a small town with many people passing by. A young child, playing, strayed from the main road. A human arm, stiff and frozen, lay beneath the grass, probably dead for a long time. However, the eerie and dark scene, the horror of the forest, did not bother the boy. In his eyes, he saw no sorrow, only a small bird that he needed to chase. Until the animal disappeared into the darkness, did he realize that in front of him was a huge figure. It was a large bear with fur as black as coal. Strangely, although the boy was terrified, thinking he was about to die, on the contrary, the bear did not seem to want to devour the person standing in front of it. It even made a strange move by bringing a bag of gold in front of the boy. However, that accidental encounter led to a karmic connection, when both of them headed towards the door of Buddhism. Karmic connection meets karmic connection. Who knows how deep their fate is? Years later, the child became a novice monk and followed the path of Buddhist Dharma. While the bear also began to cultivate on Black Wind Mountain, hoping to achieve enlightenment. Without saying, you probably already know that the novice monk later became the abbot of the Guanyin temple, and his confidant was none other than Black Bear Spirit, the bear who spared his life in the past. Time passed until one day, a monkey-faced man appeared from nowhere. Along with a novice monk from Chang'an City, visited the temple, had a vegetarian
and stayed
meal.
overnight.
When asked about their identities, the abbot learned that they were Tang Sanzang and his disciple, son Wukong, who were on their way to the Western Paradise to seek scriptures. If ordinary people are greedy for riches and honor, then for the 270-year-old abbess of the Guanyin Temple, What she cherished most were the colorful and varied cassocks that she had collected. Therefore, when she learned the identities of the two monks, she boldly asked to see the cassock that the Buddha had given to Tang Sanzan. Faced with the treasure, the abbess was extremely excited and continued to ask permission to keep the cassock for one more night to admire it to her heart's content. For the abbot, in his whole life, he had never held such a beautiful cassock in his hands. That night, the abbot tossed and turned all night, and then fell asleep without knowing when. He dreamed that he was wearing Tang Sanzang's cassock, preaching to hundreds of disciples. Suddenly, a strong wind came and blew everything away, making him wake up with a start. Seeing the cassock still intact on the table, he burst into tears. At this time, his two trusted disciples, Guangzi and Guangmu, came to ask what was wrong, and were told by the abbot about his infatuation with the cassock. That in this life, if he could not get such a cassock, it would be too regrettable. At this point, the two disciples understood his intentions. Guangzi initially suggested that they should take advantage of the two monks being tired and resting, kill them with one knife, and take the treasure. While the abbot was praising the idea and about to call for someone to bring out the knives and axes, Guangmu stopped him, because when he met son Wukong, he knew that this monkey was not an easy opponent to deal with, not to mention that if they did so and failed, they would be infamous forever. So it would be better to set a fire, which would be both convenient and would not leave any traces of murder. If it fails, people will only consider it an ordinary accident. So the monks of the temple began to pile firewood around the small rooms where Tang Sanzang and his disciples were resting, that their little trick could not escape the eyes of the great sage, especially since he had recognized the true nature of these monks as soon as they met, although he could go out and beat each of them with his staff. Wukong knew that if he did so, his master would not need to explain and would recite the tightening headband mantra, causing him suffering. So the monkey came up with a plan to use their own methods against them. He went to the South Heavenly Gate and borrowed the fire-avoiding pearl from the Guangmu Heavenly King to protect his master. As for the precious cassock, he did not need to worry, because the cassock had the fire-avoiding pearl. An ordinary fire could not burn it. When everything was settled, Wukong sat on the mountain and watched the monks busily setting fire to the small rooms. The monkey took the opportunity to blow a few more strong gusts of wind, making the fire burn bigger and spread to the entire temple. The monks who were still working hard just now had to shout and work together to put out the fire. It was an extremely chaotic scene in the middle of the night. Seeing the temple on fire, the black bear spirit, with his dark face, but when he realized that there was a monkey making the wind above, and in the temple there was a glittering light coming from the cassock, his greed arose. The bear secretly stole the treasure, leaving the devastation to engulf the temple, which was now engulfed in flames. Alas, a disaster, causing the destruction of the temple. Some coveted the treasure, while others suffered the consequences of their greed. The abbot was greedy, causing his temple to be burned down in just one night. Not only did he not get the cassock, but he also lost his treasure, making him extremely ashamed. In his desperation, not knowing what to do, he hit his head hard against the wall to kill himself. After the death of the abbot, there were other deaths of Ling Shuzi and Bai Chufi. These two fellow Taoists of the Black Bear spirit were killed by Wukong with one blow of his staff. Only the bear was saved by Guanyan and brought back to the South Sea with her. When he knelt before Guanyan, the Black Bear spirit asked, "Master, I still don't understand. Monks have severed worldly ties and don't covet treasures. Why did the elder still covet a cassock?" Guanyin looked at him, smiled, and replied with another question. If there was no cassock, how would you know if he had truly severed worldly ties and not coveted material possessions? But the cassock did not make a true monk, because the elder could not escape greed, anger, and ignorance, and then had to die in the disaster he caused. The greed of the abbot was not the greed for ordinary treasures, but the greed associated with his cultivation. From the small bird to the cassock, they are all metaphors. There are many forms of greed. Some people are greedy for food, some for beauty, some for knowledge, some for power, some for fame, and so on. To be continued.